Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell, and I'm not joined by my co-host this week, Marky Davison. Marky Davison's often doing some sporting commitments, but I do actually have a special guest, someone that's familiar to the BTSC family, someone that's also got a global perspective, someone that's part of the Commonwealth like me, and that is Mr. Owen David, Pittsburgh Owen David. Welcome to BTSC live in a way, if you like, one of the live YouTube shows. It's good to have you. Daredevil's first in the live chat. He always is. But, it's late for you, Owen. But, yeah, welcome to the show today with me.
Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for the opportunity to come on as well. I've really been looking forward to this all day. So, yeah, it should be cool. And hi to Daredevil and Brian Brown as well in the live chat. Hi, guys.
Awesome stuff. It's pretty late for you too. So Steeler fans, BTSC listeners, the BTSC friends of Pittsburgh Owen as well. Owen David, he's definitely taken some time out of the day for us at very late part of the day. But look, Owen, you're someone that's very familiar to a lot of the BTSC listeners, whether they're hearing a question, one of the 9 questions you've given Jeff Hartman, as part of his Let's Ride on a Wednesday, whether it's the comments that you do on the live shows, might be other things that you tweeted us as well. I think you definitely keep us on our toes, and you definitely have got that passion as well for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But that begs the straight question out there, and we will get to the topics of the show, listeners, as well, whether you're on the audio side or the live side. But how did you become a Pittsburgh Steel fan? What's your tie to Pittsburgh?
So it was back, in 1988, I was about, 10, 11 years old. The Channel 4 started showing an NFL highlights package in the UK with Mick Luckhurst, who was a former kicker for the Atlanta Falcons. Okay. And just got into watching that. And then because I got into NFL, decided, I've got to pick a team. Did a bit because I'm a bit of a nerd in studying things. Got into sort of looking back at the history. Really appreciate the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers as the 70s team, the way they played the game. Very working class, very blue collar, like the area that I'm from in England. So a lot of common things between Pittsburgh and Sunderland, where I'm from in the northeast of England. Very blue collar, very working class. And just also love the black and gold as well. So since '88, just been a follower of the Steelers, and even though they did absolutely suck that season, I think it was 6-10 they finished that season.
Yeah, right. So I guess we've got to ask the question, and I know we're a Steelers podcast, but who's your English football team, if we're going to ask that question?
For my sins, Sunderland AFC.
Right. So you don't really like Newcastle then, right?
No, I can't stand them.
I actually had a second cousin that played for Sunderland back in 2006. It was a striker, and then he got traded off to someone else. Anyway, that's a fun story for another time that I don't actually know that many details about. But let's get into some Steelers stuff. I think that's awesome. You and I have, I guess, a similar pathway into the NFL, with this international exposure. It's funny that you talked about a show there hosted by a kicker. There's a lot of Australian kickers and punters in the league as well. So it's kind of funny. This is how before we get into some of the topics of the show, you do some shows that you produce on your own sort of Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh network and what have you. How would you? I would love to get just in a couple of minutes your take on the Steelers, off season so far, and I think it's, I'd love to hear about it from the free agency perspective, some of the draft prospects that they're meeting or they're rumored to have been in talks with, and just your summation of how you feel going into the season. I asked this question of Mark a couple of weeks ago as well, and to the effect of how much do you think the record for the Steelers might have changed? So if you, let's say you thought going in at the end of the season, you thought going into 2022, they were a 9-8 team. Has that improved? Has that gone down? So yeah, I'd be keen to know, how's free agency gone? Are you excited by some of the prospects they seem to be really focused in on, and where do you see those prospects going into 2022?
Yeah, I think the free agency period has been really very un-Pittsburgh Steeler-like, hasn't it? So much going on. Really excited. James Daniels is someone I'm really looking forward to seeing play. Love the way this guy talks. I mean, if you listen to him, he talks like a leader already. He talks about earning respect. He talks about just not earning respect on the offensive side of the ball, but defensive side of the ball as well. I think he really could be the voice of leadership that we need on that offense that's very, very inexperienced, a lot of young players. Miles Jack, and I'm really excited to see Miles Jack and Devin Bush play together. They remind me with their mobility like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had in the season they won the Super Bowl.
Agree completely. Yep, love it.
And I think Levi Wallace is going to be a sleeper as well. I think he's someone who, he's got that understanding with Minka from Bama when they were there together, and really looking forward to seeing him play as well. There's still one or two areas of concern. Wide receivers still, for me, they're lacking in that position. That when Cody White's your wide receiver 3, and there's no real slot receiver there unless they play for Pat Freiermuth there. And so obviously strong safety is a big one going forward into the draft. Whether it's we draft someone or whether we still pick up someone in free agency, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And so what about the draft picks that they seem to be in talks with right now and they're taking the visits from? And, do they inspire you? Do they deflate you? What do you think about those?
I think, I mean, I was a bit of a Des Ridder fan since the start of last season. I watched some of his college game. So he would be someone that would be, I think, a late first round if we traded back, or would be a second round pick. He's someone who does excite me, who I think, given a year to learn, could definitely come through because he's got the NFL size, he's got the arm, he's got the mobility. I'm not controversial thinking. I'm not a Kenny Pickett fan. I think he's got a very high floor but low ceiling. I don't think he's got a lot more development in him now. And I can see a lot of potential in Malik Willis, but it's how long you're prepared to wait for this guy to come through. He's what I think going to be a couple of years before he's ready to start in the NFL. So, but yeah, there's been some interesting people. There was one today. That running back, Hassan something.
Hassan Haskins from Michigan.
Yeah, apparently he was being taken out for dinner as well by Mike Tomlin. Yeah. So he could. That's interesting, especially as we do need someone to back Najee up. So because we can't run Najee like we did last season, because he'll end up getting injured, which is just not what we need.
100%. And that's something that Mark and I have talked about a lot on this show. I'm, a big proponent of is there's got to be management of snaps across your stars, right? And whether it's Najee Harris, whether it's TJ Watt, even Minka to a degree, but definitely Cameron Haywood, they can't be playing 90% plus of the snaps. That's just, you're not going to go deep into the playoffs. So you're going to have an early playoffs injury if you're doing that. We saw that with Lav Bell, a few years back, right? And George Test in the live chat, brings up correctly, yes, that Spillane has signed his tender today. So that's positive. That gives us a bit of depth there. It takes the pressure off potentially drafting a linebacker, which is something we'll get to a little bit later on. And Still Curtin brings up, do you guys think they will draft a running back? Well, that's something we probably might address in some of the content to come. So you'll have to stay tuned for that one. And I guess with some of these rookies in mind that, as I said, we've talked about there, some of the free agents in mind as well, how are you feeling going into the season? As I alluded to earlier, has your perception of what the record looks like changed? Has it remained the same when you factor in, we don't have the franchise quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger, who even with a aging arm can still, win 6 games by, in the fourth quarter. How are you feeling going into 2022? Yeah,
I'm optimistic. I think, there's a lot of rubbish been spoken about the fact, you've got the worst quarterback in the AFC North, so you're going to be fourth. But you've just got to look at that, even without a strong safety, look at that defense that we've got. That defense, that is a scary defense. And, you can have the best quarterback in the world, but if he's constantly got the likes of TJ Watt, Cam Haywood, Stephen Tuitt, if he's back, Alex Highsmith in his face, he's not going to be able to thread the ball very well, is he? So can't go through his reads, can't go through his progressions. So with that defense there, I've got utmost confidence. And also I think none of us really know what Mitchell Trubisky is going to be like next season. We've only got to hope that that time in Buffalo working under Daboll and Ken Dorsey and working alongside Josh Allen has had a real benefit on him. And if you listen to what he's been saying in terms of his mindset's changed, the things that were holding him back in Chicago under an awful head coach like Matt Nagy have gone now. So, I'm positive about that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. And I don't know if he is the worst quarterback in the AFC North, and that might sound controversial, but I think when you look at Lamar and you look at his arm and what have you, don't get me wrong, you can certainly throw the football, in terms of, depth and distance. But, I like a lot of what I see from Trubisky and extending the play, right? Like I think, a lot of the things that I saw hyped about Zach Wilson and the way he can move around and sling the ball. And I'm not saying Zach Wilson's done enough in the league yet. And I'm also not saying Trubisky's necessarily, they're both pick number 2. I'm not saying Trubisky moves around as well as Zach Wilson. I've not nearly watched enough tape on them both to make that full assessment. However, what I have seen flashes of that similarity where they can extend the play, they can sling the ball on an angle, they'll be able to throw someone open. I'm really excited by that opportunity. I think you brought a name up before in Pat Freiermuth. Well, you look at the way that the tight ends were used, they were tried to be used. You looked at the way, like, he tried to throw the football as well. You look at the way, I talked about this on War Room a few weeks back, 3 or 4 weeks ago, where I talked about the role of the tight end as well and the way that position needs to improve in terms of we're not getting nearly enough yards out of that position. And if you look at the Super Bowl winners from the Patriots through the Eagles through to, what Kelsey does with Kansas City. And then you look at even what Tampa did in the way they've used a few different players, but they even brought in Gronk back to be able to do it. And then you look now, or even what the Rams tried to do to a degree, you've seen this evolution. And the way the Bengals use, as Moa, the tight end becomes really crucial. And I do know that there's a lot of linkages there for Trubisky. So that excites me as someone that really thinks the tight end position is quite underrated and who thinks Freiermuth is could be a top 5 to top 3, tight end in the league, as his career goes on. So I set us an interesting task, and it's what we're going to cover in the show today. So BTSC listeners, what Owen and I have done, and we're going to go through this, and we'd love questions from the live chat too. We'll try and answer them. I think everyone's really keen on which players can be drafted here, which players can be drafted there. And before I do this, I do actually have to bring up Brandon Chanis, I think is the right way to pronounce it, from the Facebook side. He says, "Today is my birthday. I will be 40. Happy birthday, Brandon." That breaks up a really good number there. That's a Spillane. A Spillane number? Is it Spillane? No, he's number 41. We don't have a 40 on the roster right now. We may do with some of the number changes that are going to have to happen. But happy birthday from everyone here at BTSC. But moving back to what we're going to discuss. So there's a lot of mock drafts that you're seeing produced by, Yamel Kuipers. There's a mock draft article that goes up on BTSC each week. That's behindthesteelcurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. All these different mock drafts that are being done, fans are doing them. I always get, joked about because in the BTSC Slack channels, I do a bunch of trades and work out how to get 13 picks, but I'm offered them all, right? And that it's not a crazy thing. It does happen. You see teams with, 8 plus picks, 9, 10 picks. And I just see value in trading back. And the stats to me show that. You look at Super Bowl winning teams over the last 6-7 years, they're getting key, contributions outside their big guys from 2nd and 3rd round picks. The hit rate on 1st round picks is not that great. In fact, there was an NFL Tapeheads, part of the NFL Network podcast in the last couple of weeks, and it talked about it. It said there's generally only 10 to 15 players that are worthy of a 1st round grade in any given draft. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Owen, as well, because I think when you look at it, it's those last 15 picks, which is where the Steelers traditionally pick. And it's why there's so much controversy. Sometimes those guys are 2nd round guys, but maybe they fill a need. I don't know. How do you feel when you hear that sort of an insight?
I definitely think there's some truth in that. You've got to look at some of our, I suppose, Terrell Edmonds been a classic example of that. If he gets a lot of criticism, if he'd been a 2nd or 3rd round pick, he wouldn't be getting the criticism he gets now, I don't think. But it does seem there's a very hit and miss with the drafters, especially in the quarterbacks as well. You look at some of the quarterbacks that are taken in that 1st round and who are very highly thought of coming out of college, but then just end up being a complete bust in the NFL. Past years, this was absolute. JP Lousman, who else? Ryan Leaf, people like that who've just been absolute busts going through. So it's very much a hit and miss. And just because they look good in college, NFL is just a complete different level. And just because you shine in the college game doesn't mean you're going to shine in the pro game.
100%. And, that's exactly it. And you look at those quarterback positions, it's funny about Terrell Edmonds. I was not a fan of him going through the first 3 years, you actually, if I don't, some listeners may be familiar with this, but Pro Football Reference do an AV rating, an approximation value, right? That they assign to someone given their season, and it's ranked on their performance, and it's I guess scaled against other people in that position and other people in the league and what they've done. If you actually look at picks between 2019 going back to, I think it's 2014. So they did 5 years of first round picks. They do an average AV for the players drafted in the first round. Now at safety, I think it's like a 5.2. And I think Terrell is averaging like a 5.4. So he's actually, despite what every fan might say about what we see on tape, because he doesn't get picks, he's actually delivering what a safety is expected to do in the first round. And I think the Steelers fans, it's like when we talk about the outside linebacker position, we are used to having a Troy Polamalu, someone that's going to be the best at the position in the league. Just because Terrell Edmonds isn't the best in the league, he might be one of the top 10. We see that as a bust, and it's this funny, sort of mindset that we can adopt. But I want to get back to what we prepared. So what Owen and I have done is there's two particular sites. There's many different sites you can get mock drafts on, but there are two that I often use that I feel over the last few years give me a pretty good feel for it. And it's not PFF, because if you actually do a mock draft in PFF, they scale this to where everybody picks. It's not about the consensus of where everyone picks. It's about looking at what people actually scouting the positions are. And I can't have any faith in a site that doesn't even count sacks properly for the NFL. So I pushed away PFF. So what Owen and I have done is we've done two drafts, one with the Draft Network and their mock draft, and we've done one with Pro Football Network, who often, they seem to get a lot of the kudos for having probably the better mock draft or the better rankings, because a lot of these mock drafts are decided by rankings. And so it's very interesting when you run a mock draft in December versus when you run a mock draft in April and where people go. In fact, there's a lot of fluctuation. There's people that move from top 10, top 20 into 60. And you'll see that in how it's going. And like there's a cornerback like Mcmichael Wright, for example, out of Oregon. In one of those two sites, he's a prospect ranked 222. If you go back 3 or 4 months, he's a prospect ranked in the top 100 and sometimes in the top 60. And he's someone that will probably be a very good cornerback in the league, but he's sitting there at 222 right now. So that's kind of where, and there's a lot of things that go into that. Kaylan Thibodeau's another one. First round pick, 6 months ago, not a first round pick now. People are saying that because coach is starting to look at the tape and go, he doesn't necessarily have what it takes. He might be a bit limited. He might be more Jadeveon Clowney-like in the NFL and all those sorts of things. So we're going to run you through our picks there. And then what we also did is for Pro Football Network, we did a draft where we were happy, we'll see what Owen's results were, but we were happy to accept a trade in round 1 if we were offered it. No, we didn't go out there and seek it ourselves. We were happy to accept it. And it'll be interesting to see what the results of that being offered that are, and the way that Owen and I might approach that if we were in the GM's position.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense to start with probably the Draft Network first, because we've only done one draft with them because the trades weren't possible in the way that we set it up. Now, there's a couple of caveats the way Owen and I did this. We did this on their predictive rankings. We did all 7 rounds, and we also did it in fast mode. So it was about gut reaction. It wasn't about sitting there and thinking who's taking this, who's taking where. Now, we may have applied that, but we did it in as fast as a simulation as possible, but in the way that we did it. I basically took an approach with my drafts of best player available while thinking about the cornerback wide receiver needs. I took less emphasis on a quarterback. Owen, is there any sort of caveats that you took to these mock drafts that you did?
Yeah, so again, I very much worked on the sort of best player available at the positions of need in that round, not necessarily the best player available, because, sometimes it's an edge rusher, sometimes it's someone we just don't need in those early rounds. So, yeah, definitely taking sort of looking at best player available in that round at that position.
Cool. All right. So I want to kick off with you, and we're going to do it round to round as we go through these. So I would love to know here who for the Draft Network you had in round 1.
Daxton Hill, safety out of Michigan. Absolutely love this guy.
Interesting, because I heard some interesting stuff this week that, I mean, some people will sit there and go, that's crazy. But I did hear from some NFL pundits around the fact that, Daxton Hill could potentially, but depending on the team, particularly if they want to play a left and right safety, Daxton Hill could come off the board before Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as someone that likes Daxton Hill?
I mean, I can see that totally, because Daxton Hill, he's lightning quick. I mean, he's got cornerback speed. There's a lot of people said that he could actually even play cornerback. That's how quick he is. He's also been described as being very much like the Honey Badger as well, a young version of the Honey Badger. So I think he will rise up the rankings. He's got a good football education at Michigan as well. Definitely could see him. Kyle Hamilton seems to, I don't know, just recently seems to have his stock falling, despite people talking about him being like a future Hall of Famer already. So it's interesting, that, definitely.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to give you one guess. Who do you think I took at number 20?
Go on, tell me.
I took Devin Lloyd. He was sitting there on the board for me. I find it hard when he's in a mock draft not to take Devin Lloyd. And when I think about it, and I think about Miles Jack and the speed that he's got, and I think about someone like Devin Lloyd and the versatility he's got, and I think about Devin Bush costing $10 million, which has got to be decided. I think it's 2 days after the draft ends.
Yeah.
You save $10 million. Like, that $10 million next year on the cap might be the difference between, particularly if you don't have a to it, that's like $20 million. That's a top wide receiver. That's someone where if Trubisky has a good year, you can pay him and you don't have to worry about everyone else. That's money that you can give to Minka. That, there's a lot of things you can do with that money. And so I continue to find it hard if Devontae Wyatt or Devin Lloyd are on the board to bypass them. And I think, did you happen to note down who were some of the picks in that first round by some of the other teams?
Let's find it on the phone.
So who was picked ahead of Daxton Hill for you? I'd love to know if you just run through the order.
So let me just find it on my phone. Who's picked ahead of Daxton Hill? So Hill went at 20. So it was my pick at 20. Ahead of him was Zion Johnson. He went at 18. Penning at 17 to the Chargers. Charles Cross, offensive tackle, at the 16 to the Saints. Drake London to the Eagles at 15, for example.
Yep.
Who was 19? 19 was Jameson Williams to the Saints, which I don't think is realistic. I don't think he'll fall that far.
Yeah, well, this is it with that injury. I mean, because mine, everyone will sit to go, where was Malik Willis? Well, Malik Willis was drafted second by the Detroit Lions, which I, by the day, think is more likely. I think it, I just can't. And it's interesting, Devin Lloyd is pretty much consensus the top, linebacker in this, and he fell, right? And I just think that is a position of need that we've addressed with Miles Jack, but we've not really addressed it long term. And so that was what was interesting for me from that perspective. I'm just trying to pull up where Nakobe Dean fell in my draft.
Yeah, Malik Willis went second in mine as well.
Yeah, I think this is the way that, and this is where we talk about rankings, right? That you do mock drafts on other sites, and it'll be interesting when we talk about PFN in a moment, and where they're putting Malik Willis. But I listen to a lot of the Draft Network, and I'm not surprised that's where this ranking has shifted them shifted in the predictive analysis from that perspective. So yeah, look, I think let's. Who else did you? Let's move on. Let's try and go quite quick fire now through the rest of the results. Who did you have in the second round?
So in the second 52? Round, I was stunned that he was here. So I took Des Ridder.
Yeah, right. Okay. I think in my one he was taken at 40. Yeah, Seattle took How about this? Seattle took Desmond Ridder at 40 and then took Christian Watson at 41. So they immediately got better. Ridder to the Seahawks is something I'm hearing a lot of, similar sort of style fit with how they drafted Wilson. I had our other favorite on the board. I've doubled down on defense. I had Travis Jones. Yay. I just thought at 52 and not knowing where Stephon Tuitt is, how could you pass up Travis Jones at the moment? I think they've done enough on the O-line to get by this year, but if that defensive line doesn't improve, we're going nowhere real fast.
Yeah.
So I had Travis Jones. Who did you have in the third round at pick number 84?
Someone again who's, I think draft stock is going to rise. I don't think he'll go in the third. I think he could go for Alec Pierce, wide receiver out of Cincinnati.
Love him. I talked about him this week on War
Yeah,
and
you did,
completely agree. Yeah, this was hard for me. There are a few wide receivers on the board, but I still felt that corner was an issue as where we stood today. So I actually picked a name, and I probably picked him a little bit higher for most people, but 80 to 120 is probably a fair representation for him. But I picked Delante Taylor, who's about 6'2", 196-ish pounds, out of it's Tennessee, I think, with him. Really good cornerback, ran fast. I think he ran in the 4.4s. I just think he's someone that immediately you can put in this room as probably the third cornerback if you had to right now and develop him. I found it too hard to pass up a cornerback there, particularly with the way the rankings fell. With the draft network at that point and the cornerbacks that weren't off the board. They did have Goodrich out of Clemson ahead of him, but I don't like Goodrich's measurables so much. And there's some things there that I think Delante Taylor is a better long-term prospect.
Yeah.
So who did you have in round 4 at 138 through the draft network?
Round 4 took just someone I thought was a solid defensive line, Matt Henningsen out of Wisconsin. Big guy.
Yeah, nice. He's someone that he's been one of those guys on my list that I'm like, I need to do more going into the draft with him. I like him in the 4th and the 5th. I just haven't had the chance to get into him. So I'm glad that you talked about that name. I might even try and look at that for War Room this week.
It was just someone who I heard that he was a big mauler. He's just there as the sort of player we need if we're going to develop the running game. That's what I heard about him. Anyway, I heard someone talk about him. I can't remember who it was now, but yeah, he was definitely that mauler we need.
Exactly. I then had so for me in the 4th, I had a player who's not going to be there in the 4th. He's probably a top 60 pick, and people are going to go, "What the hell?" But if you actually look, he's been fit through the process. He is got better measurables than Tyler Linderbaum. There's people on this BTSC network that will argue to the cows come home with me, but I'm hearing this from people that are hearing things from league sources. He's aggressive, he's fast, he's got the arm length, he's rocketed up the boards, and that's Cam Jurgens. If he's sitting there at 138, well, you go. And I know Stills has got interior offensive line. I know that, you want to probably address tackle, but this is a guy that you are building around. This is better than a Mason Cole after a year's worth of experience. Yeah. You can redshirt him. If you didn't like Kendrick Green last year, then you can't not be on Cam Jurgens there out of, I think he's Nebraska. I think he's from where he played. So who did you have in the 5th, Owen?
In the 5th, took another wide receiver, Tanner Connor, wide receiver out of Idaho, someone else I like. Quick, good guy, got good stats, 17.5 yards, average receptions in college. So yeah, decent. I think someone to bring into the wide receiver room to add depth to that wide receiver room.
Yeah, nice. I took a wide receiver as well. I took Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor. Now I know people are a bit iffy about Baylor wide receivers, but he's someone that's incredibly fast. I think he runs routes pretty well. He's someone that I think is going to make a difference. He does have to probably put on 15 pounds, I think, to play well in the NFL. But you look at the size and weight of Jamar Chase, and it's very similar to Tyquan Thornton there from a weight perspective. He did perfectly fine in the NFL and blocked well. So
he is absolutely lightning quick, isn't he? Absolutely. Was it 4.27 or something? You ran in
and this is the thing: if you got to think when you put on size, you will get a little bit slower. So even if you put on 15 pounds, he's probably running a 4.4, and he's probably got a bit of more weight behind him, right? So I like the fit there. You can do stuff there. Who did you have in round 6?
In 6, I took someone you actually were talking about the other day, Amare Barno, edge rusher out of Virginia Tech. Just, again, big guy, good backup. He ran as a 4.36 yard 40 as well. He's explosive. I thought he'd be a good depth piece to put behind TJ and Alex.
Well, I agree with you because I drafted him there with the 7th pick myself. So, but my 6th pick was Mcmichael Wright. I talked about him a little bit earlier. If he's sitting there at pick 225 and you don't take that man, well, you need your head read as far as I'm concerned. So, all right. So, who was your final pick of the draft with the draft network?
So, final round was went for best player available on the board at that point. Cornerback Kyron Mcmichael.
Yeah, like it. Yeah, it's interesting to see what the live chat as well. I think Corey probably would love this draft that I've done right now. He's talking about Jurgens in the 5th as well. I don't think enough people are on Jurgens. That's the thing. I think, if you're sitting there in 3rd or 4th, a team is going to he's going to be a steal of this draft. He's going to be like a Trey Smith that, the Chiefs draft last year as well. I agree with some of the live chat talk about guys falling. This is it. The 20th pick is great. It's not the 25th pick. We are in a position to see someone fall, or, if someone falls to 18, 19, maybe they trade up for him. All right, so let's go over to the Pro Football Network side of things that we got to do. Now, I don't want to do the one that we were happy to accept a draft pick on. I want to do the one that we both just naturally picked, made the picks at. So who did you have at number 20? And I want to try and go rapid fire through this because I'm really interested to talk about the trade part.
So in this one, someone who fell to me, someone I think would be a good future cornerback one, Andrew Booth Jr.
Love it. I would completely, take that. I would take that pick as well. He went 21 in the draft that I did, which meant that I didn't pick him. I picked Zion Johnson in this. I was surprised that he fell that late. I just thought the versatility on the O-line, you just got to do it, right? So who'd you have in round 2?
In round 2, you'll love this. Travis Jones, absolute beast. Absolutely love this guy. Since you mentioned him on War Room and went away and did some research and then watched some Senior Bowl tape and everything, absolutely love this guy. I think he'd be an absolute beast and could replace Tyson Alualu long term.
Yeah, love it. I'll give you a guess. Who do you think I took with the 52nd pick?
Travis Jones as well.
No, I didn't in this draft. He was gone, actually. I think he went at like 48, maybe. I took Carson Strong. I went the Steelers needed quarterback. He was the best on the board by that stage. Ritter had gone as well. Ritter went at like 49, so it was really interesting. But I mean, I am a Carson Strong fan, but he's not there later on. Who'd you go round 3?
Someone I think will probably won't go into 3, but Sky Moore. I think
right. Okay.
Steelers have already spoke about how much I think they like Sky Moore. They've made no secret of that, and the fact that this guy's got like Debo Samuel potential, so he can be used all over. I think he could be a real live wire, and he's quick. He can take the top off the field. I think he sounds like a really cracking receiver coming out of Western Michigan. So yeah, Sky Moore.
Interesting. I don't think he'll last that late, but if he was on the board, you'd be dumb not to take him. I picked a guy that I've liked throughout. I feel like he's going in waves, like in terms of people are really, really on him, then they weren't on him, then they're back on him. I think it depends on the evaluation. It's also that there are other names that have sort of just had a bit more draft hype around them, and so I think he could be a steal, particularly even at 84. But I picked Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati. I really like what he does. I think it's hard when you've got Sauce Gardner next to you, and arguably for some people he's a top 3 prospect in the overall draft. Definitely, probably the consensus top cornerback. So, but if you look at the tape, Kobe Bryant did some good things, good measurables too. So, what position and who did you have in the 4th?
So 4th, I went for a running back to back up Najee, Tyler Goodson out of Iowa. Just read some really good things about this guy. He's lightning fast. Change direction quite quickly. He can spin out of tackles. He did it. Ran over 1,000 yards in college last year. Just he's like, I think I read somewhere that he's got Olympic sprinter speed off the thing. And it's that change of pace back that we need behind Najee. That's something that we haven't got now because Snell isn't there and Matt gets scratched all the time. So yeah, Tyler Goodson.
Yeah, nice. And look, I wouldn't hate the Steelers going that high for a running back because I think you need that and you want to take the pressure off Trubisky. But I think some Steelers fans, you're probably sitting there going, really? There's other needs. But I understand the thought process. I agree. I took a guy that I liked initially 6 months ago, then I haven't liked him, and then I feel like I'm getting a bit back on him again, but I took Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. I just thought that's for him to fall like that at that spot it would be pretty interesting for the Steelers. Who did you have at number 5?
So number 5 went for some more tackle depth because I'm still not sold on Chooks. Someone else that you mentioned, a guy called Cordell Volson.
Oh, love that pick. Love that pick. Can play inside as well. Yes, please. Love it.
Guard, tackle, flexibility. Everything Mike Tomlin always looks for, isn't it? That position flexibility that Tomlin loves. He's a big guy as well, 6'6". Good run blocker, good pass pro. So, yeah, it'd be a good depth as well, I think. Perhaps long-term replacement for Chooks.
And everyone, Owen clearly listens to War Room because he was the first guy I previewed in the first podcast of War Room for the 2021 season. I have talked about him since, but yeah, I love Cordell Volson. I just think he's not getting nearly enough hype. And he really impressed at guard, which is interesting because he hadn't played guard since his first year of college. He was really impressing at the East West Shrine Bowl. I think that's where he was playing when that happened. And then he backed it up. I can't remember. I think he went to the Senior Bowl, but definitely East West Shrine game. And then who did you? So I had Darren Kendrick there, cornerback out of Georgia. I mean, if he's sitting there that late, and he seems to have just been this. It's a bit like, you know, Kobe Bryant. It's this guy this name that's completely fallen off the radar in a way, right? And so, you know, again, if he's that late, and this is the thing, is that you're seeing these players drop, and that may happen on draft day. This stuff does happen, and so and that's where I go back to that best player available mentality. But I think I wouldn't hate if the Steelers went and got 2 cornerbacks in this draft, just as if they went and got 2 wide receivers.
Do you think Kendrick drops though because he's in that Georgia team with so many other stars that he just gets forgotten about because they've got Wyatt and Jordan Davis, Channing Tindall, and so on and so forth?
I think so. He had some off the field stuff as well about a year ago. I think he was a transfer before last season. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was at Clemson. And so, you know, from that perspective, I think that falls into it. But yeah, I think it is. It's just everyone else is focused on Georgia, and Georgia's going to have like 15 players taken potentially in the first 2 days of the draft. I mean, it's just incredible. So who did you have with the final pick?
The 6th round.
Oh, sorry, the last 2 picks. Who'd you have? Tell me.
I had Bo Melton, wide receiver out of Rutgers.
Nice.
Just again, bit of depth there, speed, good guy, good attitude, good character, just someone to add depth to that wide receiver room.
And then who'd you have in the 7th? And then I'll give my 2 last ones.
Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, that Tua's cousin, just again for depth on the edge rusher position.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I somehow feel like he might be available. He'll either go in the 5th or he'll be like a UDFA.
Yeah.
Well, I picked a potential fan favorite, you know, for the Steelers in Connor Haywood at 225. I just thought the versatility there. I hadn't taken a running back. I liked that, you know, the could play the 3rd tight end spot as well. And then I picked a guy that I'm seeing some hype from, and people are really liking his tape. And I actually think he'll be taken higher than he's on a lot of people's radar. And that's Kyron Johnson, edge rusher out of Kansas. I need to do a bit more on his tape, but I am starting to hear from some people that I have a lot of respect for in this draft process. He's a name that they're starting to talk about a little bit better. And, you know, again, that late, you know, with that potential, I'm happy to take a flyer there. I did also think the Steelers, I've thought this consistently, the Steelers need depth, you know, at outside linebacker, and, you know, in the 7th round, if there's a guy like that that's got potential, why not? Particularly now you've got Avery, the veteran, in that room as well, to support that out. All right. So I thought it was interesting. I gave Owen and myself the parameters of you could accept a trade in the 1st round, and that was it. So it wasn't about getting 15 draft picks. It was just because there'll be more teams interested in the 20th pick than I think a lot of people realize right now. Or there'll be teams that, you know, might trade back and then want to trade back up into it. So Owen, I'd love to know who you what the trade was, and then we'll go through and pick them through. And I think you can tell me. We'll go round by round again, but we've got to.
Okay, so the trade that was offered was the Bengals. You know, as much as I can't stand them, but, you know, took the trade for them. So they offered.
Who did they pick? Who did they pick with the 20th pick?
Let me just find that. They chose. Find it very quickly. Tyler Linderbaum.
Right. Okay. He's got better on the O-line, supported Joe Burrow. Okay. And so then how did you go? Run me through. What were your 7 rounds of picks, and then you can react to mine.
Yeah. So 7 rounds. So I got their 31st pick. I went for Des Ridder there because I don't mind taking late on in the 1st round.
Yeah. 5 years too. You get the 5-year deal.
5-year deal. Even though I did see him, was it Chad Roter's draft today where apparently we traded up to 12 for Ridder, which I don't think is realistic.
Oh, yeah. Ridiculous.
52, picked my 2nd round, took Johan Dotson out of Penn State. He's a fantastic receiver. I'm a Penn State fan, and watched a lot of him this year, and I think he was really good. Someone I don't think would fall to the 3rd round, but he was there, Bernard Raymond, the Austrian guy, the tackle.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Guy. Then 4th round, a cornerback, again, showing my Penn State bias, Tariq Castro Fields.
Okay, yep.
5th round was Tanner Connor. 6th round, Jack Sanborn, big bruiser out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I like him. Yep.
And then the last round, Connor Haywood for position flexibility, like you said earlier, with his tight end wide receiver, and also keeps Cam happy as well.
It's funny when you get a trade and then you start to immediately go into your biases, right? Like, I think that's just really funny how it naturally. I did the same thing. It's just funny when you go, oh, okay, cool. I've got another pick here. And this is how I do think teams sort of look at it as well. They go, got another pick. I'm picking later. I can almost afford to take a flyer on some things. And you see it, like, there are some picks that Cincinnati made last year, you know, like some of the tackle, like Carson, I think it's Carson, the tackle that they got, or came in the tackle that they got. You know, there was some O-line in different spots. Even the Steelers, you look at like Buddy Johnson, they had a fourth pick, right? They got Dan Moore and Buddy Johnson. I think Dan Moore was their actual pick, and then the other pick was like, yeah, when you get Buddy Johnson, or trading the fourth round for the next year to get back into the fifth to get Loudermilk. From my perspective, so I did a trade. I got offered a trade by the Kansas City Chiefs, and I moved back to 29, and I also got the 94th pick. Now, I got offered 3 different sets, and some of them were multiple picks, but this had the highest first round pick that I was being offered, and it had second highest, but it had the highest next pick that I was offered. So I got 29 and 94. So I thought, you know, an extra pick in the top 100, you know, just outside the third round, perfect. So the Chiefs picked Daxton Hill. So he went where you had him with one of our other mock drafts.
Yeah.
And then so these were my picks, and I'd love you to react to them as they go through, Owen. So I picked Jameson Williams, at 29. He fell that late. You know, the thing about Jameson Williams is he's probably not ready 6 months into the season. If I took it from the mindset they could still go get a veteran wide receiver, but that if they did that, that's incredible value at 29. Steeler fans, you get, you know, 5 years with him. If he plays a little bit this year, great. Even if he redshirts, he can learn the NFL process, learn the routes, learn what it's like to be in the locker room, get back healthy, and then we've got a lights out wide receiver. Yeah. So I couldn't bypass him at BPA at like the 13th ranked player on their on the PFN's list at 29. I then went and picked Travis Jones at 52, get better on that interior line, consistent there. Martin Emerson, cornerback out of Mississippi State. Someone's been on my radar. I know the Steelers have been talking to him, so that seemed like a logical fit too. This is where this is what allowed me to get Travis Jones at 52, is that I knew I had 94, and I knew that one of those linebackers like a Beavers or a Anderson or a couple of the other guys, I'm having a mental blank there, were available. So I picked Channing Tindall out of Georgia there at 94.
Yeah, I love it. That'd be a great pick. That'd be a fantastic pick.
So I thought, why not the value there? I then went and got Cam Jurgens at 138. I stayed consistent there. You know, I've beefed out cornerback, wide receiver, linebacker. I've addressed all the needs except for quarterback there, so why not? I then went and got Amari Barno, so similar pick to where you had him there, 208. I then went and picked Jakari Roberson, which is not on many people's radar, might be on yours, Owen, after listening to some of my shows. You know, ranked really low with PFN, ranked much higher with the Draft Network. But he's a guy that can extend the field. He's a guy that runs a 4.5 40-yard time, lots of experience. Why not? Although, you know, he may be available as a UDFA. And then my final pick was Connor Haywood. But if this was their draft, how would you be feeling with that, Owen?
That's a decent draft. That, I mean, if you've got Jameson Williams there, I mean, I know like he's got the injury, but this guy's got, I mean, he's got potential to be like a Tyreek Hill. He's that quick. He would be a light side. He'd be like a Jamar Chase, like that. Yeah, I'd be happy with that. And getting Channing Tindall as well would be fantastic. I think that'd be sort of that beast we need in the middle that we've been missing now for this sort of last season. That I think was part of the reason why the run defense was so poor. So yeah, definitely that was a good draft there, Matty.
Cheers, I thought you'd like that one. I liked your draft too. I like some of the names on there as well. So that wraps up some of those mock drafts. But I guess the takeaway, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it as well, Owen, and then I think we're probably going to wrap up the show. But, you know, doing these mock drafts, particularly with the parameters that I gave you, I don't know who you usually run your mock drafts through. How did you find, like, were there any takeaways you got by doing trialing two different systems so close together, different rankings, and then even factoring in a trade? Did it change any perceptions you have about how the draft might fall?
Yeah, I think I usually use PFN anyway. But
yeah, that's right.
using the draft network, it's interesting to see the vast differences at times in where people are placed on those two platforms. So it could be a telling sign as to where teams have got them placed. I mean, Darren Kendrick's a classic one. I think he's rated a lot higher on draft network than he is on PFN, for example. Ridder, I think, has moved up a lot on PFM, but has still stayed further down on draft networks. It's really interesting to see how there's that vast difference between the two of them, and that might give you sort of an insight as to how the teams are thinking as well. And like you said, anyone could be available come the second, third, fourth round, even people you wouldn't expect to be there. Trade wise, I think the Steelers will stay where they are. I think trade wise.
Yeah, I do too. I do think, though, there's more teams that want to move up than what's being covered. And I like what you said there about the discrepancies between the two, and you've also got to understand the background to it. Like PFN kind of react to the rankings. Like they adjust them based on what they're hearing a lot and how people go in the Senior Bowl or what have you. Whereas the draft network sit there and go, we've graded these guys, and they act more like a scouting department. We've graded these guys over multiple years. We watch their tape, and they give them a grade out of 100. So it's 80 is the benchmark to get into round 2. 85, I think it is the benchmark to get into round 1. And so that's where they start to rank. So when you do their predictive board, they align it a bit to need, but it's also on the ranking of the position. So it's that's where I always find it interesting, because it's almost somewhere in the middle it's going to fall. Now, PFN was a bit more accurate last year, but it said it's basing them on how it's reacting as the league goes, not necessarily the tape. And I think a fun experiment for me over the next few years, and it will take a few years, is to sit back and go, well, yes, PFN might have got it right with how the rankings, how the draft actually rolled out, but how did those guys go as prospects? And how the draft network ranked them and graded them. How did that go over time? Because they care about it. They measure it over 5 years, and they have a grading system within their own team about who does well over the 5-year period, not just who predicts the draft, right? But look, with that wraps up this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. Owen, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I love doing this. And this is something that you and I have talked to this sort of stuff for a while. You talk about this in your shows and live chats as well. Do you have anything you'd like to plug that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, just I've sort of putting a lot of effort into my YouTube work at the moment. So I've got my channel Britsburg going, Voice from Across the Pond. So I'm trying to push out one short video a day talking different elements of the Steelers. So I've just put one out today about Hines Ward and why he should be in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, people would go across and check out my YouTube channel and subscribe. That'd be fantastic.
Awesome. And gut feel right now, who are the Steelers taking pick number 20?
Oh, I haven't. Do you know what? I actually haven't got a clue.
That's the right answer. That's actually the right answer.
I just, last year everyone knew it was Najee if he was available, but I genuinely think this year I haven't got a clue. I think if a quarterback falls like Ridder, like Corral, I think that's all they'll take, because there seems to be a lot of interest in the quarterbacks this year from Tomlin, Colbert, and everyone in the top brass, really.
Yeah, I'd be pretty upset if they drafted Matt Corral, but I'm not in that Steelers war room. I like to think I am sometimes, but I'm not. But Owen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matty.
Steelers fans, enjoy the week. There's going to be a lot more from prospects. There may even be some more free agent signings. You're going to see more visits. Don't get too wrapped up in the hype. People can't visit everywhere. You don't know what they're doing on Zoom. Remember, they drafted a lot of people over Zoom during the COVID years as well. I mean, it's still technically, we're in the COVID years, but it's, a bit back to normal from the draft perspective. Keep an open mind. There are guys like your Cam Jurgens that, you might not be familiar with now. You might not be familiar because he's not been across national media. Doesn't mean that he can't be a great player. But with that, that's this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under.